Today is your last day to pre-order an Odile and get it before everyone else and at nearly half off. Make anal prep easier at manwhorepod.com/stretch. The Man Whore Podcast is sponsored by Alt Playground. APG is more than just a place to find couples to swap with. Alt Playground is a lifestyle community for all non-monogamous and sexually adventurous people to connect and share. And you know I started a profile. Join me over at altplayground.net. That's altplayground.net. Now let's get to the show.
Welcome to the Man Whore Podcast.
Shout out to all you butch babes, all you tomboys, and all of you thoughty theys. This is Billy Presida, and you are listening to the Man Whore Podcast. Hey, welcome to the show if you're new. Welcome back if you're not. This week on the podcast, I have got on writer Melissa Faliveno. She's got a new book out of essays called Tomboyland. Very excited to share our conversation with y'all in a little bit. We'll also be hearing from friend of the show, Caitlin Bailey. She's going to give us a little update on the state of sex work in this country momentarily. And then me, I'm just some schmuck in a basement who cannot stop playing Minesweeper. Yes, that Minesweeper with the grid and the bombs and the flags and the numbers, and you only win like once every 20 attempts, that game. I cannot stop playing it. I don't know what it is. In this, I'm like just obsessed. I've lost 2 to 3 hour time blocks on more than one occasion in the past week with this game. It's gotten to the point I'm even looking up Minesweeper strategy because I've fostered this delusion that I'm going to conquer and defeat this game. I don't know what it is. I can't peel myself away from the game very easily in a similar way where like I can't peel myself away from a craps table. It's always, one more game. Okay, one more roll. Okay, no, I put the bet on the wrong spot, so I should get another bet. And I think I'm trying to grab some control over something because I think I'm starting to reach this point where I really am losing some control. Granted, getting on the scale a week ago was probably not the best idea, because now I feel like I need to get a control over my food intake, a control over my exercise, even a control over, my sex life again. I've definitely been waxing and waning with the libido and with what I want to do. Yeah, things are starting to feel a little out of control. I got to be honest with y'all. I'm hanging in there in my new compound that I've created in a basement in Bushwick. Things don't make sense anymore. There's no accountability. When you break the rules, if you're powerful enough, which I guess is not new, but it's in front of my fucking face on the TV every day. And I think I need something simple to obsess over. I need something simple to zone out on that isn't Netflix. And then I find myself working my brain with this logic puzzle game, Minesweeper. And I can't seem to peel myself away from it very easily, because to peel myself away from it is to go back out there and face life and to face the reality of of the shitstorm that this country is in. I forget if I've said this on the show, but like I'm at the first time in my life have I ever seriously contemplated I think I need to own a firearm. Because I don't know what the fuck is going to happen leading up to the day of and in the weeks after the election, really until we have got hopefully a new president sworn in. And even then, I feel like I would want to wait like a few weeks or a month or two afterwards before I truly feel like this country is not going to erupt into something violent. And so I feel like I need a gun. Another example of me wanting some kind of control to calm me, to put me at ease. And for any of you who are concerned, if I do purchase a firearm, it would be like until we have gone past that grace period after an inauguration, and then I figure I can always sell the gun to someone else. But I'm feeling both out of control and obsessed with getting in control. And I know it's not healthy to try to enact that control over my eating habits, and my partially broken hand plus the weather kind of prevents me from regaining that control via exercise and sex. Ugh, like really. And so I'm finding myself zoning out and obsessing over these other thoughts, these other ideas recently. I don't think any of y'all got to worry about me. I just, it's sad not seeing people. It's sad not doing stand up. Even though there are shows, I don't agree that shows should be happening. I miss orgies. I miss friends. I miss hanging out at a bar without feeling like terrified of anyone who comes within 6 feet of me. I miss the before times. And sometimes zoning out with 3 hours of Minesweeper kind of lets me forget about that. But then again, the world keeps spinning. The world keeps turning. I can't zone out forever. And that's something I'm going to have to face at some point or another. Yeah. Caitlin Bailey, everybody. Caitlin Bailey, past guest of the podcast. I think she's episode like 61. Very early episode. Really good one. I think it's titled Playing the Whore with Caitlin Bailey. And she's popped by the podcast here and then. And last week, I told you all about the newest thing creeping up on the forefront down in Congress, the Earn It Act. No bueno. Last time Caitlin was here, and I think December of 2018, she was telling us about how sex workers are the canaries in the coal mine when it comes to internet censorship and privacy, and how this is going to come and affect y'all soon. Anyways, Caitlin is back to tell us some more about the Earn It Act and tell us about some other things going on with the state of sex work in this country. Let's go chat with the host of the Oldest Profession podcast, Caitlin Bailey. All right, and we've got back Caitlin Bailey, comedian and director of communications at Decriminalize Sex Work, an organization pursuing a state-by-state... Oh, wait, that's a really long mission statement. I'll let you do that.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Yeah, don't. Oh, you got in too deep. You can't start there. No, I wrote that. There's nothing short and punchy about it. I'm sorry. Hi. Thank you so much for having me back, Billy.
You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, let me just fix my my organization's mission real quick. Yeah, no, I am the director of communications for Decriminalize Sex Work. We are a national organization trying to end the prohibition of prostitution in the United States, and we are pursuing a state-by-state strategy to do that. Mm-hmm. And right now, we are part of a huge coalition of organizations fighting the Earn It Act.
Yeah, so you were on here a couple years back after Fosta Sesta.
Was I right or was I right? Was that nightmare?
You were right.
That was nightmare.
How many times am I going to lose my Instagram? You know, that's where it trickles down. You think it doesn't affect you, and then you don't get Billy's thirst traps. That's the consequence of all of this.
I thought my white male privilege would protect me.
I did. Why
are my colleagues allowed to say the N-word? It's like, this is nightmares.
Yeah. So the news in my life is that I now have an OnlyFans because
you're a literal whore. I don't know, because we become our fears. I don't know. It's I am supportive. I am supportive of it. You are getting in at the tail end. It's been ruined by posers. I'm not saying you're part of the problem. I'm saying you can't profit there now.
Yeah, well, so I started tweeting like to promote it, and then I got shadow banned, and I was like, I thought like the whole white guy face and my blue check mark, I thought these were all going to protect me.
No. Welcome to the resistance.
And listeners, they're going to come for you next. And I told you all last week about the Earn It Act, and Caitlin here can give you a way better explanation about what this piece of legislation is, why it's bad for sex workers, and also, the bigger pictures, why is it bad for everybody and a free and open internet? So, yeah. Caitlin, tell us a bit about this.
I mean, I feel like the last time I was on, I did not mince words when I was like, Sesta Foster represents an existential threat to freedom of expression on the internet. And I feel similarly about the even higher stakes of private communication on the internet. And so let me just, a brief rundown of what Earn It Act does is, Earn It Act is trying to end end-to-end encryption under the true and trusted guise of protecting the children. And so the culprit here is child porn, which is being sent from pervert to pervert on private messages, between private messages, and encrypted.
Is this like deep web stuff, or is this like
No,
basic?
no, I'm talking about like WhatsApp
Oh my
and
God.
like, well, what that's Chinese, but yeah, like Proton Mail, Signal, different platforms that journalists and therapists and people, sources need to use in order to communicate privately and securely, even if they're talking about something that they don't want their neighbors or their government to hear about. I think that, some close to home examples might be, for example, the Underground Abortion Network, which, we're about to confirm one of the most aggressively pro-life judges in recent history. I feel like it is not outside the listener's imagination to imagine a future where Roe versus Wade is overturned. And even, in a country right now, before we've lost the protections of Roe, safe and legal abortion is still inaccessible in large enough swaths of this country that underground abortion providers already exist. And they use places like Signal, things like Proton Mail, in order to communicate securely, but they don't want that information out there, right? And so bills like Earn It Act will open up a backdoor that we know is going to inevitably be used to crack down on victimless crimes like adult consensual prostitution, is going to be used to ferret out sources and whistleblowers, and is going to compromise the secure communication between therapists and attorneys and their clients.
And that's we've already been seeing a lot of the censorship stuff in like all Facebook, Instagram.
Right,
They've been changing the terms of service, like no eggplant emojis, right? Because whores might use them.
Right. Yeah, no, it's like they say they're protecting the children. They're doing no such thing. There's no resources, being directed to domestic violence shelters. There's no resources being directed at creating, more harm reduction strategies, making it safer and easier for kids to report abuse against them. We're not investing in any of those strategies. No, we're just doubling down on the thing that doesn't work, which is really broad censorship of mostly harmless stuff.
Now, one of the things that stood out to me when I first started learning about this piece of legislation is that, which has just been entered, like I'm having you on now because it's becoming more real.
Right.
It's out it's not just an idea. It's like on the floor and shit.
I've been screaming into the void this whole time.
Yeah.
Really. Thank you so much for having me back on, but it has been the same song every day.
So one of the things I noticed was that there's like a committee that would be formed under this to decide.
Yeah. So people like Lindsey Graham will sit around and spitball the best way to invade your privacy to crack down on the libs. And so that's the draconian, worst case scenario of what this will look like, but it will very likely look like, the fever dreams of the Family Values Coalition, right? Like the cracking down and conflating sexual imagery with abuse and violence. We're going to put these 14 people in a room and make whatever they come up with law. That's what makes this bill so dangerous, is that we don't know we don't exactly know what legislators are going to use to open that back door. It's not so spelled out that you can mount sort of like a reasoned defense against it. It's just, 14 elected officials as part of, an appointed committee coming up with what they think is the scariest, which is not usually the underlying factors behind systemic abuse and exploitation, but is rather, I'm sorry, it's just so hard to take someone like Lindsey Graham seriously. I feel like we spent so much time reading about the grotesque details of what he likes to do to gay male escorts in DC, not 3 months ago. And I know that feels like 1,000 years ago, but it's somebody who is openly known as Lady G in DC is going to sit around and pontificate about what they think sexual material should exist online and whether or not adults ought to be able to communicate privately. And it just, it strikes me as the height of hypocrisy. And just this sort of blatant abuse that our lawmakers and the top 1% feel like they're immune to the laws that they pass that the rest of us have to follow.
Yeah, and a lot of us have like sexy little group chats. I mean, my Patreon community, we have the Peep Show, we have a little Telegram group. It's on one of these end-to-end encryption type of messaging apps, and all that shit
Right.
could be targeted. Be like, I don't know, maybe they're doing some whoring in their slutty group chat, and now you got Lindsey Graham coming through your back door, which I don't think anyone should have to be subjected to.
I don't mean to fearmonger here, but like, is it really such an absurd idea to imagine, the kind of surveillance technology that we have in the private sector, not even being in the hands of government, right? But being in the hands of background checkers or employment options. Like, imagine if you could hire a company to dig into the dirty life of every future employee. Like, that's, I don't think it's crazy in a world where the Hobby Lobby won a Supreme Court case protecting their freedom to slut shame their employees or whatever it was they were fighting for, to play.
They didn't want to pay for the
birth control of their slutty employees, right? They didn't want to be right. Like, it's they just wanted to play judgmental dad or whatever in some out of control role playing game, right? Like, I don't know what was happening there, but we said that was okay. We said that it's allowed for an employer to not support the private healthcare choices of their employees. I do not believe that it is a stretch to believe that a country that protects that in a much more liberal Supreme Court wouldn't go so far as to say, yeah, I mean, if you don't want to hire perverts, whatever that means to you, then like, you're absolutely allowed to do that. We have a long history in this country of labeling our political enemies sexual deviants. And there's been, I mean, like, we've gone through a couple of different sex panics in this country. And so I feel like this is not a moment that we want
It's like a cusp of like, will we go back to another one, or will we continue this sexual revolution that's been happening?
Yeah, like, some of y'all remember the Satanic Panic. Like, that was the 80s. So like, it doesn't feel like that much of a stretch. We are experiencing a trafficking panic right now, right? Where the public fear does not represent the reality, right?
And even worse, they're conflating the sex trafficking with sex work when one is just not the other. When they
they create a lot of perverse incentives, right? Like, if you conflate adult consensual prostitution with trafficking, and you make a lot of, I don't know, federal funding available, if you can say that it's against trafficking, well, now every adult woman that you handcuff because she gave a hand job to somebody for money is suddenly somebody that you get to say you rescued. And that's how 89% of the federal anti-trafficking budget got eaten up in 2018, arresting consensual adults.
Mm-hmm. And not helping actual trafficking victims.
Helping nobody.
So now, what can people do right now? The state of the bill, if I'm correct, is it's in committee, and it was been introduced to the House. I know I called my rep, Joshie Gottheimer, the centrist cuck of New Jersey. Ugh, that fuckhead. I called him. I called Cory Booker. I called Bob Menendez. I called my people and said, hey, I don't fucking want this.
Yep.
And it's going to affect more than the people you think it does.
Yep.
What should people be doing? I've been getting used to calling a rep.
Yeah.
So I'm a little more comfortable with it. But what can people do? It's the first time they have no idea what to expect, because that was terrifying.
Sure. Absolutely. No, it's absolutely terrifying. We should keep up our screaming into the void. Calling your reps is a great place to start. I really recommend that. I also recommend buttressing efforts in Congress to study the impact and get into the public record the impact of SESTA FOSTA. And I was
going to bring up O'Connor's bill.
And so that's a great place to start, which is it's easier for politicians to get behind studying something than it is for them to stand, to take like a pro-child porn position, which is essentially like what it's like. It's, understand that it's an ask, but then also support the judicial fight against SESTA FOSTA. Woodhull versus U.S., which is a case that's making its way through the appellate court system right now. You can support that by donating to the Woodhull Sexual Freedom Foundation, and that's a foundation that is going to fight alongside a lot of other great orgs. So that's Woodhull, the Woodhull Sexual Freedom Foundation. And of course, you can find more information at decriminalizesex.org. You can watch our video about Earn It. It's 2 minutes long. It's very funny. It's a sheep in wolf clothing. It explains what Earn It Act is. It is safe for work. You can spread it. You can email that to all of your friends. There's no explicit content in our pro or anti-Earn It Act video. It's just educational. And so I feel like the more people that you get educated about this bill, the harder it's going to be. What we don't want to have happen is what happened with SESTA FOSTA, right? Where 98% of our elected officials on both sides of the aisle voted unanimously. There was no way for us to mount a defense because it was just so overwhelming, and there was absolutely no pushback. We want there.
Oh, you mean even our liberal hero Bernie Sanders? Caitlin?
Yeah, I know. It's
Even him?
Like, yeah, it was hard. I hate it when I'm like, no, Rand Paul was right in this. You know what I mean? I hate it when
the
I have
one
to
time.
Yeah, there have been like 6 times, but when he's one of 2. You know, you got to be like, all right, hats off to, but no, this is seriously a guy who was like, guys, Section 230 is like important.
Yeah. But besides Ro Khanna's bill to study the effects of FOSTA SESTA, besides the Earn It Act, is there anything else legislatively going on?
I mean, on a federal level, I would just, sign up for decriminalizesex.org's newsletter. Get educated. There are a lot of state initiatives to decriminalize sex work or to educate lawmakers about decriminalizing sex work. And yeah, I mean, I wish I had more of a laundry list for you, but
no, that's fantastic.
There's an election coming up. It's a big deal. Nobody knows. Nobody can look past November, and why would they? It's like I keep shouting about the Earn It Act, and it's like, oh man, it's like you can't see the concentration camps. It's like, no, I see them, and that's why it's so important that we can talk. Okay.
Your anger is always so entertaining, though. So I'll have links to all that stuff in the show notes. And Caitlin, you also have a great podcast yourself. It's out with a new season. I personally listen. I don't listen to any of my friends' shit, but really? I do listen occasionally to The Oldest Profession.
It makes a lot more sense than this very friendly rant. Thank you so much for having me on. So late. I'm like, man, it's just been a scatterbrained day. Do you ever go through? I feel like we all have cabin fever together. I don't know if I'm just so excited to talk to another person. Thank you so much for having me, Billy. But yes, I'm out with a 3rd season of the Oldest Profession podcast. And our very first episode, we did a deep dive on Victoria Woodhull, who is the first woman to run for president in the United States in 1872. And she was an old pro.
Yeah. So everyone go check that out wherever you're listening to The Man Whore. Please go listen to that. If you check out the Woodhull episode, but favorite episode of mine was the Sylvester Stallone. That was a gem for me.
Yeah, I see. You guys have a lot in common. I get it.
Oh yeah, can't you tell our similar body types, writing abilities?
I mean, you both work in show business.
Well, we've both shown our business for sure. Boom! Haven't been on a stage since March, but still don't got it. Well, Caitlin, thanks again for coming up and chatting with us. And why don't you go ahead and say goodbye to everybody?
Goodbye.
Before we get to this week's guest, Melissa Faliveno, let's do the fan whore appreciation moment real quick, okay? I want to give a shout out right now to Tyler Kochel, whose Twitter is mostly drinking accomplishments from an app called Untapped. So, sir, congrats on all the very impressive drinking I guess you're doing. And thanks for supporting the Man Whore podcast on Patreon. And I want to give a thank you to Zachary Wade. Oh, Zachary Wade. If there were ever like a 90s boy band name, Zachary Wade, that you sound like you just barely didn't make it into the Backstreet Boys. Very impressive. And very impressive that you are an official fan whore on Patreon. Way to go. And you too can become a member and join Tyler and Zachary and yours truly in our private fan whore discussion groups, the Champagne Room, the Peep Show, as well as gain access to over 200 bonus episodes of this show. Join our community, gain access to the bonus episodes, become a member today at patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. That's Patreon, patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. And now for this week's guest, Melissa Faliveno. Melissa is a writer and essayist. She has a new book out called Tomboyland. Let's go fuck with gender with Melissa Faliveno. The Man Whore Podcast is sponsored by HotMovies.com. HotMovies.com, longtime supporter of this podcast, and I hope you're supporting them too. And right now they're celebrating the Halloween season. Today and today only, you can get 30% off all clips from their Supernatural category. Yeah, Supernatural category with titles such as The Summoning, Sacramentum, and Samurai Sluts. HotMovies.com is not just a place where you can buy really hot and sexy clips from your favorite porn stars from your favorite porn studios featuring all your favorite porn categories, but it's also a pay-per-minute porn site that makes it both an ethical and affordable way to hashtag pay for some of your porn. And you can get 20 bonus minutes on top of any package you sign up for when you go to HotMovies.com and use promo code MANWHORE. One more time, use promo code MANWHORE at HotMovies.com. The Man Whore Podcast is sponsored by altplayground.net, the lifestyle site for your next non-monogamous adventure. Ooh, yeah, adventures, exploration, ooh, sexy. And right now, there's a new way to try out APG. There's a way to have a little bit of a taste of it, just to see what all the hype is about. You can now try the most inclusive and modern lifestyle site today, 3 days for just $3.99. APG is a hospitable lifestyle site and resource for all sexual orientations, relationship models, and gender identities. Jump on and experience features like the sexy big wall, where you can just share your butthole with a bunch of strangers if you want to. Yeah, you can enjoy some sex positive content in the podcast corner. Hey, shows like yours truly, the Hot Mess Comedy Hour, Front Porch Swingers. We're all over there. So again, try the most inclusive and modern lifestyle site today, 3 days for just $3.99 at altplayground.net. Now let's get to the show.
And like putting a book out my first book out during the pandemic has been like, I've been able to do a ton of podcasts, which is great. And I do them primarily at home. Also, I recorded my audiobook from a closet inside my apartment.
Oh, you got to do your own audiobook?
Yes, in the closet, no less.
Did you want to do your own audiobook, or did you want someone else's voice?
No, I really badly wanted to do it. And so there was actually an audition process.
Yeah.
Because they have like actors who do this shit. Mm-hmm. And so I had to audition. I recorded like my own sample, sent it in. I got the part. And then the pandemic happened. And what was supposed to happen was they were going to fly me to their studio in Michigan. And I was going to spend a week in a recording studio with a director and shit. And then they were like, sorry, we can't do this anymore because of the pandemic. So we're going to have to just go with an actor. And I was like, wait, listen, I'm in Brooklyn, but the construction has stopped. Like it's eerily silent. I have a recorder. I have like basic audio abilities. I've got a good mic. So I built a little studio in my closet, hung blankets, and then a director Skyped in. And I figured out a way to like jury rig it so that I could monitor and he could monitor me. Right. So he was like listening to my recording.
I didn't even know audiobooks had a director.
I know. Well, I think like some of them probably don't, but he was pro. He's done like film and video and whatever. And so he could cut in and be like, can we do that last bit? Yeah. Start at the top or whatever. Give it a little more feeling. So that was fun.
And how's the response been to the book?
Pretty good so far, Knock on wood.
I'm sorry. There's no way this is real wood.
Knock on laminate. It's all. I mean, it fooled me. It's nice laminate. Yeah, it's been good. Overall, pretty positive so far. I've gotten some good reviews and outlets that I really had no business having my book in, like NPR and Washington Post, and overwhelmingly positive reviews on like all the trade shit and. So yeah, so far so good.
Yeah, well, good time to say it. I'm sitting down right now with a essayist and Midwesterner, as you put it on your own website,
Yes.
Melissa Faliveno. Or Falavina, if you were going, I'm surprised that's not in the book. Do you care to share that? So before we started, when we were off mic, we were comparing our Italian last names and how they were supposed to be pronounced, and I did my whole shtick. But yours was. Do you care to share that story?
Yeah,
again?
of course. So the Italian last name should be pronounced Falivena, but of course, when my grandparents came to the States from Naples, they decided to pronounce it Faliveno. But the story goes even further that they were in Newark. And, for some reason, my grandfather changed our name, which had been Falivena, to Faliveno. And the story goes that somebody else down the street had the same last name. There were two Falivenas on the street. So my grandfather, changed the name so they would stop messing up the mail. My grandparents have been long dead. And I don't remember when this was, but it was like, years ago. I was like sitting around with my remaining Italian family and my cousins, and we were recounting this story, and they were like, no, that's not the story at all. It was just that we had this feminine last name, and he wanted to make it more masculine, so he changed it from an A to an O. And I was like, wait, what? What's the actual story? But as I was saying earlier, it feels on brand for me with my lean toward the masculine, so I just sort of embrace the, we're Faliveno now,
Or even just a relationship to gender and presentation. Just it seems like that was a nice way to begin to setting you up. It feels like that part of you started long before you were born.
Yeah, maybe it's in my blood apparently.
Yeah,
but I do have these like weird like visions of my grandfather being like, like just deciding he needed his last name to be more masculine. Like,
yeah, I like the idea of like he was getting teased on the bocce ball court or something.
Yeah. Hey, Mike.
Oh, Falavina.
Falavina.
Yeah, go toss that ball like a girl.
You ain't got balls.
Italians, not known for being nice to feminine men.
Nope, not at all.
Did you know your grandfather?
Very little. He passed away when I was 12. Actually, I think my grandmother passed away when I was 12. I think he died when I was 7. He lived in New Jersey. We by then were in Wisconsin.
Okay. I was going to add because I'm also Italian
Jersey.
from North Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, we're everywhere. I mean, mostly in North Jersey, but they were in Newark. They moved to Orange. That's where my dad. Orange. I'm sorry. My dad grew up in Orange, and he moved down to Florida, as Italians from Jersey do. That's where he met my mother, who was from Wisconsin, who had left Wisconsin to go to Florida. They met each other down there, came back to Wisconsin, and that's where I grew up. So, like, we were the only Italian family in my small Midwestern hometown. It was all, like, Norwegians, and, like, everyone was named Sutter and Anderson.
It's a
like
lot
Gunderson.
It's a lot of Nordic.
Yep.
There.
And they were
it's
like,
a lot of Nordic, but then like I feel like I don't know if it's Somalia or what, but it feels like a lot of Africans end up also out like in Wisconsin.
Yeah, definitely. Just not in my town. Or really, like it's just like I grew up in a very white town. I think we had one black family, and so like my last name was like super exotic. The fact that I am, darker complexioned, have this like olive skin. They were like, what? Yeah. What are you? Anyway, your question was about my grandfather. I think I only saw him like maybe a handful of times before he passed away, because we would drive out to New Jersey and see my dad's family. But
so there wasn't too much opportunity for him to have like maybe an influence on your thoughts on masculinity and femininity.
Not really. I mean, my recollections of him are like not unlike my maternal grandfather, like very silent, kind of, this sort of like stoic man who didn't do a lot of talking. And that's kind of my recollection. But he was a barber. He had his own shop in Newark, maybe Orange, actually. But basically, he cut the hair of all of the other, Italians in town. And my dad and his brothers grew up like working in the barbershop and sweeping up clippings. And another thing that I didn't learn until much later, I was like, oh, what a wholesome what a wholesome little life, you know, a barbershop and the boys hanging out, you know, making quarters for sweeping up hair clippings. And then I found out like basically they were running numbers out of the.
Of course.
Like, of course they were, but like I never knew that.
but like,
I know, right?
They're never just cutting hair.
They're never
just
hair.
doing anything.
No.
There's always a side thing. I don't just do a podcast. I used to do blackjack in my mom's basement.
We all hustle, right? Yeah, their hustle was numbers, and my dad didn't tell me the story. One of my uncles told me the story of my grandfather like tucking the numbers into one of my uncle's like breast pockets of his shirt and like go deliver or whatever you do with the numbers. I don't actually know, but like that was again one of these stories that I found out later. And it was like when you enter that magical sort of moment when your family looks at you like an adult and like they just start telling you adult things and you're like, what?
It crushes you. It's truly, because it makes me feel like you lied to me this whole time.
I know.
Like, you find out this uncle struggles with this substance. You're like, what? I just thought he was really upbeat and into rap music. What?
Yes.
You know, you find out this person cheats on that person and you just like, it's like finding out Santa Claus isn't real when you're 18.
Yes, totally. Like all of the understandings of your family are crushed. Yeah, that's real.
Yeah. Were there any other revelations like that as you were in adulthood?
Fewer on my dad's side. I think more happened on my mom's side, and that that's when it's like I started hearing more stories about like the people who were alcoholics and like who died really young of alcoholism, and I had never heard that before, and so that kind of stuff, My
stuff was like, this great uncle, you just don't leave the kids around with him. And I was like, what?
Oh.
You're going to tell me this now?
Jesus.
Not then?
That would be something to tell you when you're young.
Yeah. What? I was like, I can't believe you're telling me this now.
But it's like, do you have that? Like, are you like, why didn't you tell me? And
so that particular one was a guy who I like basically never saw. I probably met once when I was a kid, but so I probably would have heard more about it if it was relevant, but it was just like weird. You find out these big family secrets, or you found, oh no, this person, that was not the roommate there, they're gay. Like it's that type of stuff. You just like, it's so weird to have that parsed out to you later in life when, I don't know, I think we can trust kids to just accept a lot of stuff.
We don't give kids enough credit. Like I think that like there's this tendency to protect them from everything, and like they know anyway. For like 9 times out of 10, they're familiar with things that you think that I don't know. Yeah,
they go like especially in today's age with like sex and everything. It's like they know. Like
YouTube. What the?
You gave them a smartphone, you thought they played Candy Crush. No, they're watching porn. Yeah, that's just what's happening.
Yeah, and like on TikTok. And I don't even know what happens on TikTok, but I know they're probably seeing body parts at the very least. I'm like the only person not on TikTok. I can't handle one more social media platform.
Well, I guess similarly, like whenever you came, like how old were you when you came out to your family?
Oh, well, let's see. I'm 37 now, so 37. I didn't actually ever come out until this book came out.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically what I did was like, I sent my parents the galleys of my book a couple months before.
What's galleys, like excerpts?
Like advanced reading copies.
Oh, like that type of a thing?
Yeah, exactly,
okay,
exactly.
Gotcha.
So you send it out to reviewers and stuff, and so it was landing in strangers' laps and on strangers' desks, and I was like, okay, they're going to find out some stuff about me in this book that they don't know, or at least that I've never told them, like lots of it. So my plan had been they're still in Wisconsin, in the town where I grew up. My plan had been to go out to Wisconsin, bring them the book, sit them down, have a whole talk, and be like, hey, listen, I'm queer. This is what that means. Also, all of this other shit happened in my life, and the book deals with it. Here's why I didn't tell you. Like, hopefully the book will make that more clear.
Basically doing to them what has been done to you with all the other family secrets.
Yes,
stuff,
exactly.
Right?
Like, surprise.
But seriously, it's like that's when it comes to like coming out, whether it's about being queer or gender identity, or even it's like I'm polyamorous, and
Yeah.
this is relevant because now there's another person you have to meet.
Right.
Whatever it is, it's like we have the opportunity to pull those shenanigans on our parents and family as well.
Right.
So how'd they respond? Or what
Payback.
ended up happening? You said that was the plan.
That was the plan, yeah. So then COVID happened,
Uh-huh.
and so I could no longer fly out to Wisconsin, as was my plan. So I sent them 2 copies of the review, the galley, and then wrote them like a 7-page letter, and just sort of said like the same thing that I had planned to tell them in person, which was, you know, you're going to find out some stuff, and my hope is that, you know, we don't have a super close relationship, but it's gotten closer the last couple years, and you know, my hope was that like you'll read this stuff and you'll know me a little bit better. And then I sent it off, and they read concurrently, so they each read a copy, and so as they would finish an essay, I would get, from my mom, I would get little texts when she finished each essay. And when she finished the essay called Tomboy, which is about my sexuality and my gender identity, she sent me this text that was really sweet and really supportive, and just like, that was great. And then she sent little texts along the way. My dad was silent. He did not send me texts, but I knew he was reading. So when
because like mom's saying like, oh, he's outside reading the book or something.
Yeah. He like, I think we like checked in once too, and like they said, oh, we're both reading the book. But then when they finished it, we have a phone call every Sunday, and that particular Sunday after they'd finished it, we had like a 3-hour phone call, wherein we basically processed everything that they learned in the book. And we talked about stuff that we have never talked about, and that like they didn't know. And, you know, my mom sort of said like, well, I always had a feeling, you know, because look at me, you know, and also I think she stalks me on Twitter, and I am, of course, which is like this totally, like, this is a thing so true of this generation. Like, I'm more out on social media than I am with my actual like family.
Yeah.
I talk about queerness on social media, but I think for a long time it was like, well, they're not on Twitter. They're not
older people in
this.
Wisconsin not known for being on Twitter.
Nope. But she was lurking, and so I think, you know, she was like, well, you know, I saw some things, and I saw you use that word queer, you know, and at one time, I think it was like after Trump got elected, and I went to like a rally. I posted something on Facebook, which, I'm barely on, but they are.
Yeah, which isn't that the weird thing that they're super on Facebook?
Oh,
and we're
so on Facebook, and I just like not on it at all, and like I've forced myself to promote this book. It's just terrible. But I had like posted something about like, as you know, said something like, as a queer woman, and my mom said like she was getting like messages being like, what does that mean?
Like, what do you mean? What does that mean? What's there to parse from that?
I know, right?
It's not like I had something like that once where last year I got interviewed for an article for New York Times on like comedians who have done some kind of sex work, right?
Okay.
So there's like, you know, there's the guy who used to do stripping, the former porn star, whatever.
Yes.
I have one line in the whole article, and from all the whatever we talked about, she only ended up using a quote. That's fine. I'm in the Times, good clip.
Yeah.
But she refers to me as comedian Billy Procida, former sex worker.
Yeah.
Does it? All the other people, she says what they did. Me, I'm just former sex worker. No clarification, which I don't care.
Yeah.
I share a name with my father.
Oh,
we get the
shit.
same Google alerts.
Oh man.
So I get a call. I'm driving back from this gig in Kentucky. I'm driving through West Virginia, and I get this call. It's like, Billy, you know, did you see this New York Times article? They called you a sex worker. Do you know they called you that? Do you know? Because I just want. And I was like, and I tried to like mutter out like, oh yeah, you know, I did some like camming in college, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal,
Yeah.
you know. And he's like, oh, okay, so long as you know that they called you that, as if like they insulted me.
Oh man, that's awesome. Did he know?
I mean,
that
like,
you had done that?
I still don't think he understands.
Okay.
What did they respond in that sit down? You know, in the call, what did they respond to best, and what was more difficult for them to kind of respond to?
Well, you know, the sexuality stuff was actually, they were, you know, it wasn't like they were like, effusive about it, but they were like, oh yeah, you know, my mom was like, yeah, I kind of knew.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I am a fake smart person. What does effusive mean?
Oh, like really sort of like, oh God, how would you say it? Like over the top, like,
Gotcha. Okay.
really excited, really like, enthusiastic.
Okay, cool.
It wasn't like that, but it was like, almost like a non-starter. They were like, okay, and my mom, I think, said basically I kind of had a feeling. And then my dad, in like good sort of like Italian, Jersey Italian sort of way, he was like, I always had a problem with that word queer. It just, it's just what the wise guys used to call each other, and then like it was an insult. And then, I just like, it makes me uncomfortable. And I was like, yeah, me too. That's kind of what that essay was about. Like right. the inherent discomfort with that word and like reclaiming it. And that's what we do. And he was like, but I like bisexual. Bisexual, I like. And it was like, I laughed and he was like, no, I like it. I get that. And it was like, there's a definition,
There's no trauma
like,
attached to bisexual.
No, exactly. And it's just sort of like, oh, that makes sense. You like women and men, Of course, there's like a lot more to that. And it's the definition for me is beyond men and women, but like one thing at a time
for him,
yep,
right? Yeah,
like you get it and you're
and he's
cool
not
with
angry.
it.
Yeah, cool.
Also, he's been talking about putting a Black Lives Matter sign in their lawn, and I'm like, yes, awesome. There's one other yard that has a Black Lives Matter sign in our neighborhood in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. I'm like, you guys just do it. So he said he's going to do it.
But what was more difficult for the, or if anything was difficult, was there anything that was like tough for them to accept or process?
There's an essay in the book where basically like I talk about this, like growing up, I was really into softball. I played softball, of course. I had planned to play softball in college at the University of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. It was like my trajectory. I was going to be like as professional as a softball, fast pitch softball player as you can be.
Yeah.
And throughout the essay, I sort of reveal that when I was in high school, I had this inappropriate relationship with my softball coach, who was also one of my high school teachers. And that was like completely unknown to them. Mm. And I don't even tell the whole story about that in the essay. I just kind of mention it and I talk about how like it's a really common thing, I think, to be a girl and to like latch on to older men as sort of this like, I don't know, like symbol of like acceptance and like, when you're a girl, you want to be the object of affection and attraction, and essentially you learn to be the object of male desire. Mm. And so I was like obsessed with him, and we had this like flirtation throughout my entire high school career, basically. Mm. Which then went on to be something else, but I didn't include that whole story in the essay because it was just part of it, and that was the thing that they were like, we had no idea, and I think it really devastated them. They were like, my mom kept saying things like, I wish I could have done something. I wish I would have been there. I always kind of thought there was something there, but I never said anything. I didn't want to push you away. So that was a thing I think that like was much harder for them to take. Mm. I think because like they had no idea that I was experiencing that and going through it. And also they trusted him and, as my coach and my teacher, and I did too. And like, there's a breaking of trust there. And I think it was like they were confronted with their parental inability to protect me.
Yeah. Because like you being queer doesn't unless you think you believe in the whole, nurture versus nature stuff, unless you believe in that, it doesn't really reflect upon their parenting.
Right.
What does it say about me?
Right. Exactly. And that, and then other people who have responded to that, like, it's interesting because I haven't gotten like many negative responses, but people have latched onto that and had that question like, well, where were your parents? Like It's such a strange question. Like, do you really think that parents know everything about their kids at all times? And like,
what age are you in? Is this high school?
high school,
Okay.
yeah. And so this question of like, well, where were your parents? Like, I think it's really common for for high school kids to keep secrets from their parents, And so there's this like reaction that's just like, well, what was happening? How could this happen? And it's like, it happens all the time.
Do you assign any blame to your parents for what happened with that?
No, because I also know that like as a teenager, I was like highly precocious and, went out and got what I wanted. And like, that's what I wanted. And, so I do think of it as sort of like a grooming situation, but I also think of it as like, I had a thing for older married men for a long time, and that continued through my young adulthood. And like, so I can see that as sort of like I had a role in it, even though I was a kid. And I don't blame myself, certainly, but I don't blame them either,
Well, it sounds like you take some portion of responsibility for what happened with that.
Yeah, and that it's been an interesting like journey to that understanding. And a lot of that came from therapy when I was just like talking about this with my therapist. And I was like, I kept using the word grooming and I was like, grooming. And she was like, let's take a step back from this word that you've heard a lot about and talk about yourself as an agent. And like, when you're 18 years old as an agent, because, she's very big on like giving, not putting yourself on the victim. She has a triangle of victim, perpetrator, hero.
No, trust me, I know.
You know the triangle?
I've bounced around that triangle. It is hard to phase out of it,
man.
but it is freeing to learn. Oh, you just have to, instead of bouncing to different spots, just get out.
Yes, get yourself off the triangle. That's what she always says. She's like, I'll say something. She'll be like, I think you're on the triangle.
Oh.
And I'm like, you're right. You're totally right.
A friend who I was hoping would come be a hero was like, here's the triangle. Here's what happens, and I'm not going to come be your hero because then I get sucked into the triangle. I will help you phase out of it, but I'm not going to get in. I was like, oh, it's
such a useful thing.
That was a really, really fucking helpful thing to learn for a lot of other, engagements I would get into later. But
no, totally.
So she's trying to get you out of that triangle and actually examine what happened and what the roles were.
And like to see myself as like a sexual being even when I was underage, which is true. You are a sexual being when you're a teenager, but like being able to recognize like what was wrong and what was, behavior that was out of my control and was not my fault. And then also to look at like my own agency.
So it sounds like you used to, or I mean, maybe still now, we'll get there, but it's like, it sounds like going from when it happened to now in between, you might have fluctuated on how you felt about the whole thing.
For like a long time, I was the perpetrator. I did this, I went out and I like got him.
Yeah. It was like, was it like a pride thing? Like, oh, this is a thing. I'm
going to go snag that married man. And like, and I thought that because then I had this like really super self-destructive streak for like 10 years where I repeated that behavior over and over again. Like that was my sort of root behavior. And then I went out and I would just like find like older married dudes and try to conquer them. And it was like this control thing that I had because I was very out of it. And it was like, well, if I can do that, then I'll have some sort of power in this world that keeps fucking me over. And so when I thought about that, I was like, well, he was just, a victim. And, I just like went out and got it because I think that I was still in that space where I saw myself as like a creature with power, like as a 16-year-old girl, I think she has power, and like,
what limited power do you have, like as a young woman or a young adult woman, than like your pussy?
Exactly, it's the only power you have. And then, well, you think it's power, and then you quickly realize that it's not power, And so I think there's definitely a period of time where I was like, I was the perpetrator. I did that. It was my fault. If anyone finds out, his life will be ruined.
Then it sounds like you read a Bustle article that had the word grooming in it. And you were like, grooming?
I was groomed, And that's true. Like something happened where like I was talking to friends, I think, and it was very like useful to reframe it. And it was like, listen, you were a kid and like he took advantage of you. And I was like, oh, maybe, and then I think I sort of got kind of swept up in that narrative, and that was the narrative I used. And then in a therapy session, actually not so long ago, that's when she was like, okay, let's back up and like, let's think about this. And maybe it's not as cut and dry as either one of those narratives. Maybe there's something else going on.
Do you look back at this affair in a positive light, a negative light? How do you look back on it now?
Definitely not positive. Okay. But not always negative either. It's just sort of a thing that happened, and it informed a lot of my life. And I think, it fucked me up for a while, and I went down this path of like, really just like this like habit with men, just really risky sex, drinking, drugs, self-harm. I was a wreck for most of my 20s. Aren't we all? But like an acute wreck for like the first 5 years of my 20s.
Would you go after married women in the same way?
Nope. No, it was always a men thing. And I write about this in the book a little bit, this like, which I think, it took me a long time to realize that like, as I was sort of discovering my queerness and like figuring out, oh, I'm bisexual, like the way that I wanted men was much different than the way that I wanted women. And the desire takes a different shape.
What are those two different types of desire?
I think with men, there is this sort of like, there's more of an inherent power dynamic that I'm attracted to, and like, because the women that I'm attracted to like look a lot like me, same shape, same, roughly same size.
Looks like they could help you fix a bike.
Exactly. Yeah. Like on the butch end of things, not like super
I don't
butch,
see a keychain, but like,
listen,
there, the carabiner.
It was hiding. It was hiding. The Ring of Keys, Alison Bechdel.
Love that song.
That's so my jam. My friend Gina and I always talk about the Ring of Keys and being attracted to butch women.
Everyone go read or listen to Fun Home.
Yes, please, immediately. But yeah, so like the women that I'm attracted to tend to look like me. We tend to be like the same size, same shape. There's like more of like bodily, like we're on the same level. The power, we seem more equal. I feel more equal, even though truth be told, the women that I've dated have been much stronger than me. But with men, I am definitely like, I'm attracted to an inherent power dynamic. And like a lot of that is about like, I don't know, being a bottom, and I'm not necessarily a bottom with women, but with men I typically am, and like, and having that like an attraction to a sort of potentially dangerous power dynamic, which I think is why I got into BDSM. Where
how'd the parents take that?
They didn't mention it actually, but what's true is that they knew because when I was younger, when I was in my 20s and I was living in Madison, Wisconsin, still in college, I started writing for the local alt weekly Isthmus, and for some reason the editors gave me like carte blanche to write about whatever I wanted to, and so right, and I was like, I'm going to write about interesting subcultures. And so then I went and wrote about the BDSM scene, got involved with it, ostensibly to write about it, right?
So I'm just at this orgy for an article. What?
Legit.
I wouldn't just be here.
That's what I said. And in the article, I wrote it like a fucking, like, I'm just this immersive journalism who's going to be a fly on the wall. But, what was really happening was I was going to parties and I was going to clubs and I was like getting into it. And I had a boyfriend at the time and we were like inviting people over from Craigslist and we were polyamorous and, we were just like everything. But I wrote this piece for the Alt Weekly that was just like, look at this world of kink in Madison, Wisconsin. So they knew that I had dabbled in it. I don't think they knew that it was so much a part of my life for those years. Like, that was not clear to them. I also talk about very specific things in that essay, like fisting and like being tied up and being on like a St. Andrew's cross and whipped.
Which, by the way, parents need to be okay hearing about fisting.
Yeah.
I think if you're also fine hearing about like, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm going to give birth. Like,
For
are these
sure.
not the same similar expansions of the vaginal canal?
Oh my God. There's like
my similar beef, by the way, is with office culture. It's like, oh, we're not supposed to talk about our sex lives, but you can tell us, oh, yeah, Jim and I are trying. So you're fucking.
Yeah.
Condoms?
Yes.
Like, I don't care either way. Let's just pick a rule. Because either like I don't hear your shit and I'll shut up
Fucking
about
yes.
orgies, or I can talk about the threesome I had last night and you can tell me how much you want to, get some gunk up in your puss. Just pick one. But they're the same thing.
Yes.
We're both talking about fucking.
100%. 100%. The only way that people talk about sex, I mean, puritanical people talk about sex, which
But
is...
we're trying to make a life. I mean, technically we could by accident if it
yeah,
goes
yeah.
wrong.
that we're trying. And like, how do you not, when you hear someone say that we're trying, do you not think of them having sex with their partner every night? Like, you're trying.
Not to bring up Louis, but like Louis has that joke, he goes
yeah.
like, well, when you say the N-word, it's like you're putting that word in my head.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what that is. So,
Yeah.
and then my sister, she's pregnant now. And I said, when they were trying, I was like, Morgan, you're basically just telling me that you and Andy are fucking, which is cool. of all the family members, I'm pretty sure it's coolest with me, but it's just like, just know that that's what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. No, totally. But like, as soon as you talk about fisting and like, and there's also obviously like, homophobia happening where like I'm talking about fisting a woman and they're like horrified by the act of fisting, horrified by the implication of lesbianism.
It's like, why can't you be a good Christian and just fist a man?
Yeah, right. Obviously. Yeah. But like, what's true, for people like us and like people who live in New York and, it's nothing, it's just a way of life. It's just a thing.
It's way weirder as a New Yorker to hear about someone purchasing a home than hearing about fisting.
For sure.
Right? Or like fisting, you'd be like, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, we just put a down payment on a house. What? How does that even work? How does it happen?
Yeah. I mean, truly. Same with having children. Like when my friends talk about having kids, I'm just like, how could you do that? And like both bodily and financially, I just don't understand it. Like, and like where I come from, everyone's just like, oh, you do the thing, you get married, you have the babies, whatever. But like you talk about fisting, and they're just like scandalized. And the one like negative reaction, like to my face, that I have had about the book, I won't say who it was, but somebody that like is close to me, but is hyper puritanical. And was just like referred to the book as disgusting. And I was like, oh, honey, you have to deal with some shit.
Oh, wow.
That's not about me.
Yeah. It was interesting earlier you used the word, you referred to yourself as a bottom, which now I'm not heavily in like the BDSM scene, so maybe I'm missing something that I would pick up at a munch. But we don't frequently hear women refer to themselves as a bottom.
Right.
It's almost like an assumed part of your sex life, right? People just assume, well, like, oh, you're the bottom. That's that's the lady part.
You receive.
You're right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, when I was in the BDSM scene, we used sub a lot.
Right.
So it was either dom or sub.
But like bottom, we're normally hearing that like amongst like queer dudes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And I mean, honestly, I think a lot of that, the way that I like, this is something I'm still working out. And I think our sexualities and our gender identities, because I think they're fluid, I think we're like constantly defining, what we are and how we exist in the world. But like, I definitely, when I think of like, when I imagine myself sometimes, I feel so much more akin to a gay man than I do a gay woman, like something I just like feel a little bit more akin. And, I don't identify as trans and, but it's not off the table. But
do you
like,
identify as cisgender? Are you in the non-binary?
I call myself genderqueer.
Okay.
I'm not really sure where that falls. I've tried on non-binary, but I usually just say genderqueer.
The last person I recorded with also referred to like use that kind of phrasing like trying on a label.
Yeah.
Like and literally was like, yeah, I tried on non-binary, and then eventually they've come out. He's come out as a trans man.
Yeah.
Identifying as genderqueer, trying that on, like, how's that feel to you? Like, because I keep hearing this phrase like almost experiencing gender.
Yeah.
And I only experience gender when people just like place manness upon me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's like a huge part of it. Like people putting their own sort of interpretation on you.
So it's not like a wake up in the day and like, I'm feeling this. It's more like...
Not for me. I mean, I know that is the experience of a lot of people, but like for me, it's just sort of like, I feel like I exist in this space that is both masculine and feminine, erring on the side of masculine most of the time. Like I don't feel femininity very often. So I kind of feel like I live in this realm of masculinity, and like I embody that masculinity. And some days I actually like feel very conscious of it, and some days I don't. Like most days I would say I just kind of exist in my body, and I don't think about like how I'm presenting or how I'm, whatever the signifiers I'm wearing. But when someone, like if I get misgendered or if someone like interacts with me in a weird way, that's when I'm like, oh, right. Like I remember that the way that my body exists in the world looks a certain way or like appears a certain way, that like people look at me and, make their own interpretations, which when I'm at my most butch is usually I get interpreted as a man. So, and then I write about this in the book too, like when I'm walking down the street with my partner, who's a cisgendered man, like we've been mistaken for a gay male couple before. Like I tell the story of getting into a cab, and like, I think this has now happened a couple times where like the driver's like, where are you fellas heading? I'm just like, I talk to him like, how do you feel about that? And he's fine with it at this point.
How do you feel about that?
This essay Tomboy like is basically trying to figure out how I feel about it. And at this point it doesn't actually bother me. And what some of the things that I grapple with in that is like when I get called a lady feels worse than when I get called a man, which is weird. I just like, I cringe, like, and I just feel like so uncomfortable when people are like, when you're at a restaurant and I'm with like other women and they're like, ladies, what can I get for you? And I'm like,
or ma'am.
Yeah.
Can I get you another water?
Gross.
Ma'am?
Ew.
Yeah.
Don't call me ma'am. And not just because like that feels matronly, but like, ew, it just feels ew for me. So I think that like that's worse than when I get called sir.
What was the first questioning you even had about you and gender?
I think it was when I was playing roller derby, which is like for the first time. So we got there. I played roller derby for like 5 years, and 3 to 4 of them were in Madison, Wisconsin. And that was, I had like a re-emergence of self when I was playing derby. Like I cut off all my hair. I had a really short haircut, much shorter than it is now. I was like in really great shape. I was super athletic. And I just like started wearing masculinity a little bit more in my daily life. And that was when I like first fell in love with a woman, and she was also like super androgynous. And, that was really when I was like, oh, my gender might be kind of complicated, and like, I still called myself a woman. I still sort of thought of myself as like female, but de facto, I guess, like because I always had, but that's when I started like hearing the word genderqueer, and like had friends who played derby with me who identified as genderqueer, and started having conversations that like most people have in college that I just got to a little later. I was like, tell me about this genderqueer.
But also when you were in college, like this type of terminology wasn't more widespread. It wasn't just readily available.
No.
We weren't talking about.
No.
Forget about the difference between all of them. I don't think we were even saying really any of those words as much.
We weren't. And I took like one women's studies class in college, and even that was like edgy, Yeah. I like went to shop at like the lesbian bookstore and was like, ooh, I'm at the lesbian bookstore, and it was very exciting, but I also felt like super countercultural, especially in Madison. And yeah, so it was not part of the conversation. I was also just like, until that point, I was hanging out with predominantly straight people. But I was existing in the BDSM world and roller derby around the same time. So I was really discovering my sexuality, like experimenting, like sleeping with a lot of women, sleeping with a lot of men, figuring out that I enjoyed both, and then really like fell in love with a woman and was like, oh, I also have the capacity to fall in love with women, which I didn't know until that point. And so the sort of discovery of sexuality and gender identity kind of happened concurrently.
And what do you see as the difference between genderqueer and non-binary and gender non-conforming? And because you said a lot of, I've read some things you said about like labels and the fluidity of labels, and how like it's kind of almost like a human thing to want to kind of classify ourselves, but how that can change. I'm torn personally in that I feel like some things are and some things are not, and then some things are very fluid.
Right.
I know that the frame on this poster is black. Some days I might say like it's ebony or some variation of black, but it's still a black frame. I wouldn't ever say like, oh, now it feels like it's a green frame today.
Yeah.
And
there are objective truths.
And when it comes to identity, I don't know what things are objectively true and then what things are more subjective.
Yeah. I mean, I think
I'm open. By the way, I know my face might look like sometimes that, oh, we don't know where he stands. I'm open to whatever. I'm just like, getting some kind of consensus at some point I feel like would be helpful for me to understand them and my relationship to those terms.
Well, I think part of the confusion is that like there isn't a definition for anything, right? Like like language, we create meaning. We create words and then we create the meaning, and like the meaning of words can change based on like morphology, not to get too nerdy into linguistics, but like colloquialisms, the way we use words. Merriam-Webster adds something to the dictionary and it's now a word, even though we've been using it in certain circles forever.
Or they change the meaning of the word literally to mean the opposite of the word literally,
God.
Right? It's like
sometimes the change is not good.
And that's but that's where I kind of get to. But people go like, words can mean whatever, and then I point to something like that, and I go like, that's what happens. If they just mean whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be like oppressive in it. I'm almost like I will celebrate whatever, but can we get some definition? But then maybe not having a definition is the point. It just, I don't know. Like we can't be mad at people for being confused if like it's inherently supposed to be confusing.
Yeah, and I think that like because we add. We develop new words that like there is going to be some built-in confusion stuff, but like I think the reason that we have genderqueer and then we have non-binary and then we have gender fluid, like I think they all fit under the same umbrella in like the large umbrella of gender non-conforming is kind of how I see it. Like whatever gender you present or identify as is somehow not in line with either your biological sex or like what is expected of you, if you're a woman, whatever. And so I think people keep like developing different ways to say it. And I think a lot of it is just because, I don't know, when you're trying to define yourself, it can be really hard to like stick yourself in one box. And it's like, if the nature of the thing we're trying to describe is fluid, how do you contain it? Right? Like, how do we possibly create one word to contain all of these identities?
If there weren't gendered expectations of man and woman, if someone, if someone's biological sex then dictate what their gender was supposed to be, or even whatever, forget that, whatever gender someone identifies as, if there weren't all these expectations of that gender, whatever it is, do you think we would need these terms? Like, are these terms, do you think these terms are almost like temporary placeholders while we dismantle the concept of gender?
That could be. I mean, I think that like if, in this like idyllic world where we weren't, didn't have fucking gender reveal parties and like didn't raise kids to like identify pink with girl and blue with boy and like you get the truck and you get the doll, which people still fucking do everywhere. Like there wouldn't be this expectation of that is what girl is, that is what boy is, or this inherent conflict that like when you start to feel like, wait, I'm a girl, but I hate the Barbie and I hate pink and I hate all these things, which are super simplistic breakdowns, but like there wouldn't be this like identity crisis and there wouldn't be a need to find a word that fits if like we just got rid of the fucking words. So I don't know. I mean, I think that like it's all very amorphous, it's all changing, it's all fluid, it's all like, I think in an effort, to find something that fits, because we do want something that fits, but there's this need at once to find something that fits and to define yourself, and then this need to like resist that and sort of push against that and say, I don't need one word. I don't need one thing. So I think that that's what like the queer, genderqueer, non-binary, fluid umbrella is trying to do, like trying to resist a definition. So even when like we have that built in, like you need to define yourself, it's like, nope, not going to do that. It's like this like sort of, it's a resistance,
Well, Melissa, thanks so much for chatting with me. This was great. I feel like we were going forever if I didn't have therapy after this.
Oh, man. I've got therapy coming too. It's so good.
Fantastic.
Yeah, this was so good. I feel like we need to talk again about our Italian families.
Any time. Due to the pandemic, I have lots of time. Melissa, where can people go find you, get your book?
Does that note just say pussy?
Oh, it says plugs in bad handwriting.
Okay. This is what I see. I looked at the notebook and I was like, oh, that just says pussy. Seeing pussy everywhere. You can find me at www.melissafaliveno.com. I'm also on Twitter at Melissa Faliveno, and I'm on Instagram at MLFaliveno. I think that covers it.
Yeah. Melissa, thanks again so much. And people go check out the book. And why don't you go ahead and say goodbye to everybody?
Thank you so much for having me. Bye, everybody. It's been real.
If you enjoyed my conversation with Melissa Faliveno, we've got a bonus episode with her coming out tomorrow exclusively on Patreon. Over there, we're going to be talking about, kind of the source of this Midwestern sexual shame that seems to exist among many of y'all in the Midwest and flyover country. What's that about? Melissa and I are going to get into it. And you can gain access to her bonus episode as well as 200 other bonus episodes of the Man Whore Podcast at patreon.com/Man Whore Podcast. That's Patreon, patreon.com/Man Whore Podcast. Melissa was just a delight. She signed a copy of her book after we were done recording. That was sweet of her. And also Caitlin Bailey. Thanks again to Caitlin. Go check out her podcast, The Oldest Profession. You should be following me on the social media by now, but hey, maybe you're new, maybe you forgot, maybe you just got Instagram for the first time, so I'll remind you of the tags. I'm on Twitter at @TheBillyPresida. I'm on Instagram at BillyIsPresida. And if you want to enjoy some sex-positive memes or get yourself some Man Whore merch, go smash that like button on the Man Whore Podcast Facebook fan page. Oh, yeah. If you want to send me your comments, your questions, your criticisms, you can send that all on over to manwhorepod@gmail.com. Oh, and I think you would really enjoy this. I shot some content with someone y'all might be interested in. I shot a whole mess of photos and videos with Roxanne. Oh yeah, that Roxanne from the oral sex auditions. Go see all the fun that we had together and all the fun that she had shooting me over on my OnlyFans, available at onlyfans.com/callmebilly. Hope you enjoyed this. What am I still saying? I need to get off this mic. I need to go play Minesweeper. Stay slutty. The Man Whore Podcast is sponsored by HotMovies.com. Try out some ethical, paid-for porn for free with none of those hidden fees or secret subscriptions when you sign up at HotMovies.com and use the promo code MANWHORE.